Alright guys, so in this video we're working on the Pontiac. We're going to change the thermostat, which is right there. I've already put the new one in it. Here's the old one. The old one didn't really look that bad. It probably still worked. But I was told when I bought the car that it did get hot. So just as a precaution, they're only $9. If your car ever gets hot, like I said, it's a $9 fix. Go ahead and replace that thermostat, because if it gets too hot, it'll warp it, and then it'll stick, and you'll constantly have overheating problems. The other thing that we're going to do is change the oil, and we're going to wire up the cooling fans down here, because they do not work. They didn't work when I bought the car. They were wired up to a toggle switch. The toggle switch wiring was ran along the fender and then through the door and into the car. Well, I shut the door and the two wires arced off of each other and almost burnt the car down. Like, let's see if we can pick this up in the video. Right there on the corner of the battery was where the wire, see that red wire right there? That was part of the wiring that they did on that fan, but it also melted the corner of the battery just a little bit. It didn't melt it all the way through. It looks a lot worse than it actually is. Also, they had it wrapped around this hose right here that runs to the windshield washer fluid. So I'll have to replace this hose because it does have a lot of holes in it now. But I've already priced that. That's also only just a few dollars. It doesn't cost very much, so it's not a big deal to replace little things like that. But I want to be in this car as less as possible and make it function as well as possible. So the fix for the fans are actually going to cost me more than what I paid for the car to fix. So I bought a switch kit. It will be wired up correctly to a relay and a fuse. So when the car is turned on, you'll just flip that switch and the fans will come on. But if you forget to turn them off, when you turn the car off, they will turn off as well. They will not stay on when the car is on, or off, I mean. So that is the plus side to wiring it this way. If you forget, you're not going to come out to a dead battery. That is the plus side to wiring it correctly incorrect, if that makes sense to you guys. It's the incorrect way to fix the problem, but it is a correct way to wire up an incorrect problem. So I'll go ahead and get the thermostat buttoned up. I did have to take quite a bit of stuff off to get this wired up, or what is the word I'm looking for? Installed. There we go. You see that bolt right there at the tip of the flashlight? Right there. That one is a nightmare to get to. That one right down there. I actually had to take the breather box off, which is a good thing, because I found a rat's nest or mouse nest, whatever you want to call it, in there. The mouse is actually still in here, believe it or not. It went running in there whenever I pulled that filter out. But that's just the ram air. I am going to block this side off with a screen, so that way whenever I put everything back together, hopefully the mouse goes through the point of least resistance and comes out the bumper right there where that little slot is. That's where the forced air comes through into your breather box. That's how the ram air works, if you didn't know. It forces air into your breather box, which gives your intake more air and allows you to run more fuel, so that you have a higher air-fuel ratio, which means more compression, higher RPM, most speed. That's really all it boils down to. So I'm going to go ahead and get these tightened up and get everything mocked up. I won't put everything on it because I want to show you everything that I had to take off. Sorry about the poor lighting. It is dark. It was daylight when I started this, and I had to, kids have school in the morning, so I had to make dinner, get them fed, get them bathed, get them ready for school, and now it's dark outside, so we'll be playing around in the dark. Alright guys, so I got that thermostat back in there, and I got the cooling rail back in. I just set it here because I want to show you guys how much effort it takes to get that off. I mean, it's a pain. Alright, so it plugs into that open hose right there. Let's see if I can angle this right there. So this guy right here plugs into there. This has a 10mm nut that bolts there. It plugs into a hose there, plugs into a hose there. All the plug wires have to come out and route above this and then clip back into that clip right there. The actual bleeder has to pop back into the water pump, and then on this side, this nipple here plugs into that hose there. I mean, so there's a lot of hoses that you got to plug in to get that thing off. So I'm going to go ahead and get that buttoned up and show you what it looks like after it's installed. Alright, so we got the hoses all plugged in. I haven't put that bolt in yet. Got the plug wires routed above that line, like I said. We've also got those two hoses plugged in there. Got the 10mm nut right there, and we got that hose connected there. So everything's coming together. We'll get that bolt in there, and I also wanted to show you the other hose that I had to take off here. It was this hose here had to come off. There's the actual rubber hose that it plugged into, but it just runs under the plug wires, and then under this, I'm not really sure what that is. Yeah, so it went under that, clips down into that, and then this hose here plugs into this line, like so. So I'll get that buttoned up, get that bolt put in, get that clamp on it, and I'll get the breather box cleaned out, get a screen or something in there, or maybe just take the air hose to it and blow it out, and hopefully blow that mouse out onto the ground, if it's still in there. I doubt it. Been making a lot of racket in there on purpose, try to get it to run out, but I haven't seen it, so for all I know it's still there. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright guys, so got that bolt in. It's only an 8mm. Got all the hoses clamped down over here. Got all the wires back in place. Got this little pipe right here all buttoned up. It's done. Got the main radiator hose right there. Ran into the thermostat housing. It's tightened up. Got the breather box on it. I did get it cleaned out. I didn't run a screen in there, but I did blow it out with an air hose, so nothing flew out of it. So I'm sure the mouse is gone. That hose, I showed it in the last clip. It's all buttoned up. So everything is put back together on the top end. I'm going to top off the coolant. Now, with this system, since it's with this car, since it's got a pressurized system, this little guy right there is the bleeder valve to get all the air out of your cooling system. Basically what you'll do is you'll break that bleeder loose and run the car, and any air that is in the system will come through there. If you hit an air pocket while your car is running, your temperature gauge is going to shoot through the roof. I mean, basically until that air pocket passes, the engine has no coolant, so it's just going to skyrocket on the temp gauge, which is no good. So we're going to fill the reservoir up, crack this bleeder valve, start the car up, let it run for a while, get the system bled. Then we'll change the oil, and the switch is probably going to be another day, just because it's getting pretty late. I'm getting kind of tired. Want to go spend some time with my wife. She works every weekend, so I never get to see her because I'm only off on the weekends. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time with her, maybe watch a movie or something. So I'm going to get this thing buttoned up. Once I fill this up, get that bleeder valve opened up, I'll start the car and then start the video back up so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Alright guys, so this little guy right here is what I was talking about. You hear all that water coming out of there? Now that it's a steady stream, we'll go ahead and plug it up. And then we'll tighten down the lower nut, and we'll get a small one for this top one. And this top one, all you got to do is crack it, so that way while the car is running, you won't lose much coolant, but obviously air has a less resisting point than liquid, so you'll lose a lot more air and a lot less liquid, and that's how you bleed this system. So now that we've got the majority of the air out, where we had to take this line off, all these hoses, the thermostat housing. Also, another thing you can do is squeeze your hose here, and just it'll back flush the system through your radiator, through that lower hose, and up into your reservoir, and it'll push the air out here just as a starting point, just to get started on your bleeding. So that's one way of doing it. And then you crack that, and that'll get the majority. And then just to finish it off, because you're going to want to run through the entire system to get the air out of everything. Now, granted, that thermostat is closed right now because the vehicle is cold. As the vehicle heats up, that thermostat opens up. That's how they work. The warmer it gets, the more malleable the springs are. So the pressure that the water pump creates through your system pushes on that thermostat, which opens it up and allows the circulation through the engine. So with it being cold, that spring is fairly stiff, and the water pump cannot generate enough pressure or enough force to open that bleeder, or that thermostat. But when it warms up and everything gets hot, the metal, I guess, that spring is made out of becomes more malleable. Think of it like putting a rubber band in a freezer. If you put a rubber band in a freezer, take it out and immediately try to stretch it, it's going to break. But if you let it warm up, it'll stretch and become malleable. It's the same concept with a thermostat. So I hope that helps people understand how thermostats work. I'm going to go ahead and fill this reservoir back up, crack that upper bolt on that bleeder, and start the car. Hey guys, before we start the car, one thing I wanted to mention, that bolt there is made out of copper or brass. It's a very mild steel, so don't try to torque it down super tight because you will break it off. Actually, the first time I ever did this was on a Malibu, and I broke it. And I'll tell you what, drilling that out and tapping it was not fun. So just be mindful of that. That is a very soft metal. Don't over tighten that, it will break. But let's see if I can do this with one hand and hold a phone and a flashlight. There we go. I did get the upper one broke loose. Now I do want to point something out to you guys. See that tip on there? That actually sits down in there, and that's what plugs it off. Think of it as like a valve stem in a tire. You have to push the valve stem in to allow air in or out. This works in the same way, but backwards. You have to back it out. You don't have to take it out, just back it out to allow air and liquid to come out. Do not lose this. You can't just buy this, you have to buy the whole thing. Don't lose it. Alright, I'm going to go start it up. Alright, so the car is running now. We're going to give it a little bit of time to warm up. Then we're going to open up that lower one there. It's a 7mm bolt. All the smoke you see is from the antifreeze that spilled onto, I hope you guys can hear me, it's from the antifreeze that spilled onto the manifolds. It'll smell like crap, but it'll burn off, and no harm, no foul. It won't hurt anything. One thing I do need to do before it gets too hot is tighten that back up. I had to take that off to get that rail off, and I almost forgot about it. That would have been bad. Leaked oil everywhere. Well, maybe not. I don't know how much pressure these valve pans have in them. So yeah, we'll let it idle for a minute. We'll actually sit in the car and we'll talk about it a little bit. Alright. See if we can focus on that light. Yeah, that's why we're changing the oil. Plus, I don't know when the last time it was changed. It's a good thing to do, regardless. Before I ever even drove this car, I checked all the fluids in it, made sure everything worked well enough to drive. One thing that I did notice about this car, the fuel gauge works when it wants to work. It doesn't work all the time. When it gets down to about a quarter of a tank, it plummets to E. And then when you start it up, it'll sit on a quarter tank. Right there. It'll sit right there until you start moving. Then it'll just drop down to E. And when you fill it all the way up, like to the point where the gas pump will click because it's full, the gauge will be sitting right there. Like it'll just round all the way over, and it'll sit there until, I guess, the sensor or the float, however the system works, gets to a certain point, which I guess is the line right below full, and then it'll jump back up. So that's one thing I noticed about it. But most of the time I don't let my vehicles get down to a quarter tank. Once they start dipping below half a tank, I fill them up. And the fact that it jumps past full, that doesn't bother me as long as it continues to do what it's doing. Once it gets to a certain point, it jumps back. That's okay with me. But if it ever just gets to that point where it sticks and doesn't ever go away, then that's when I'll dig into it and find it. And I just noticed something about this car that I didn't know. I just found out. It's got lights in the mirror. I thought that was pretty cool. I've only had this car since Tuesday. It is now Sunday. So I've had it for 5 days. But I bought it for $400. I ended up putting 2 wheel bearings in the front, one on the passenger, one on the driver. I videoed the driver's side. Passenger side is identical, so I didn't video it just because I was in a rush. I took it down to get an alignment, and they wouldn't do an alignment because the passenger wheel bearing was bad. I knew the driver one was bad because whenever you jack the car up, the driver tire would kind of toe in, and if you put a pry bar under it, you could feel the slop in it. So I knew it was bad. And when we took it out, if you watched the previous video, you could tell that it was very bad. The rear race stayed in the I'm drawing a blank, stayed in the cylinder that it is pressed into, and the rest of the hub assembly just fell out. So that bearing was very bad. Passenger wasn't that bad. You could hear a slight drone. I didn't pick up on it at first, but whenever I took it down to the alignment shop and they told me that it was bad, I drove to a parts store, and I was really paying attention, turned the radio off, and was listening for any signs of a drone, a wong 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 kind of sound. That's how you know you have a bad wheel bearing. Or you'll hear like metal scraping metal as you're moving. Only when you're moving, though. If you hear metal scraping metal while you're not moving, this is most likely very bad. You need to turn your car off. You got something going on that's not good. But I could hear a slight drone. So I went to the parts store. Okay, let's start over. My alignment appointment was at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I got down there and they told me they wouldn't do it. So I talked to them and I was like, look, it's really only going to take me about an hour to get the part, get back to my house, get it changed, and get back here. So they were like, all right, well, go ahead and get it changed and come back and we'll get you in. So I left there. It was probably about 8:15. Went to the local parts store, grabbed a wheel bearing, came up to the house, replaced it, and was back down there to get my front end alignment by 9 o'clock. It worked out beautifully. Like, I told them to give me an hour. I was literally back in 1 hour. Like, it couldn't have went any better. Alright, so the temperature is starting to rise pretty quickly, which means that the thermostat is opened up. So now what we need to do is go out there, look at our reservoir, make sure that it's still got fluid in it, and then crack that bleeder. So that's what we're gonna do really quick. Alright, so if you notice, we've got plenty of fluid. Now we'll grab our ratchet. I left my flashlight in the car. Grab our bleeder, or ratchet. We'll open up that bleeder valve. I just went ahead and took it out. You see all that air? Let all that air come out until it's a steady stream of fluid. That's what you want to see. See how it's getting more and more steady? we're purging the system to get all the air out. Still catching some air pockets here and there. Alright, so it's to the point now where it's pretty well steady. So we're gonna put that in there and just let it slowly bleed out just for a little bit longer, and we should be okay. Oh man, let me grab my flashlight so you guys can see what I see. Alright. Alright, so you can see the fluid coming out of it. Our reservoir is just about empty now, so you see that steady stream back there? We've got the system bled. So now what we need to do is tighten this up. And then before we suck any air in, we need to put just a little bit of antifreeze in there. We don't want to put too much in there because the system is hot now and will crack something if we're not careful. So we're actually reading just under where we need to be. So we're in good shape. It looks great. Now mind you, my cooling fans do not work right now. They were wired up to a toggle switch. It was not done very well. So I bought a kit. I've got a relay and a fuse to stop whatever issue caused it to fail the first time. So we'll go ahead and shut the car down now. The system has been bled. It's working fine. Now we'll let it cool off and we'll fill that reservoir up. We'll start it up and let it run for a while, and we'll see what happens with it. Make sure that's tight. Like I say, don't over tighten that. That will break. I know from experience. It was not fun. It was very hard to fix that, and I ended up selling that car. I didn't really need it at the time. It was just sitting over here in my yard where my boys' bikes are, and I sold it to a guy that truly needed it. A buddy of mine came up and he was like, "Hey, I know a guy, you know, he's trying to get on his feet. He needs a vehicle." So I sold it to him. I really helped him out. I sold it to him on payments. He gave me $200 down. I let him take the car. A lot of you are losing your mind over that right now, I'm sure. But when you get a recommendation from a friend that you've known for years, you trust them. A lot of you, you don't have friends that you can trust like that. I'm fortunate enough that I do. So I wanted to help the guy out. He needed a vehicle to get back and forth to work. He wanted the car. He gave me $200 down. We wrote up a bill of sale. I did keep the title. And he told me he'd be back in 2 weeks when he got his first paycheck to either pay the car off or give me more money. He came back in 2 weeks and paid the car off, and I handed him the title, and it worked out beautifully for both of us. He had a car to get back and forth to work on. I got what I wanted out of it. It worked out great. It's nice to have friends that you can trust like that. If you guys don't have anybody that you can trust or refuse to trust anybody, you should try it. It might work out nicely for you. But that's all I got. I'll do the oil change and everything in another video just because the engine's hot now and it's late and I want to spend some time with my wife, watch a movie, hang out, you know, do some family things. So please like and subscribe my videos. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps you out on your thermostat change and bleeding your system. Now remember, be mindful. Don't leave that open for too long and run your reservoir empty, because all you're going to do is just suck air right back into the system. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you later.